So, questions from your discussion? Any questions?
I just wanted to...
Kunga, hang on, get the mic on. Mm-hmm.
I wanted everybody to notice Nanny 911 on Monday nights at 8 o'clock on Fox, because these British nannies are coming in and acting like Buddhas for these dysfunctional families. It's a miracle what they're accomplishing in a week. And if you have a chance...
Is this a question, Kunga, please?
It's a comment.
Well, darling, keep your comments for later.
Okay.
It's not time for advertisements.
All right.
Thank you, very good idea.
You're welcome.
Oh, bloody hell, Kunga. Anybody got any questions? Good on you, Kunga.
Okay.
Betty.
Our big thing that we wanted to discuss and did discuss was fear.
Good.
Big time.
Yeah.
Heavy duty. And so we went round and round, but perhaps you could suggest or comment on a couple practices that would be really helpful when fear comes up. Fear of death, fear of relationships, fear of being alone, fear of dying, fear of not being happy, and on and on.
Well, the point is when we understand the fear, which is coming, it's the deepest one, meaning therefore the direct antidote to that is to try and get a sense of how the I really does exist, which is the hardest one to understand, because it's the most primordial, I mean, as Lama Zopa says, when you've realized emptiness, there is no fear. You've cut the fear because you've cut the misconceptions. But it's the hardest one. I mean, attachment's hard enough to even see,
Sorry, I don't think the mic is on.
It is, I'm just far away, maybe. Can you hear? How come? Before it was down there, and you were hearing me. Do we have to make... Oh, you're doing something.
Yeah, he's making the adjustment. Go ahead.
I see, okay. So, it's like... well, in general, a moment-by-moment way to work with what arises in our mind is to try and look at the thing that's arising. This is what working on your mind means. And I think the normal way we are is the moment something arises in our mind, and let's say it's he is doing that, what we do is we start looking at him. We start talking about him and what he's doing, and so we lose the opportunity to look at what is look at the thought itself, the feeling itself. That's a really tough job, but this is the point. That's the whole business of all the delusions. All the delusions are caught up with something out there. Whether it's even yourself, it's still the delusion, I am this, I am that, he is this, he is that, she is this, it is this is... You understand my point, Betty? So what we have to practice is this skill of when the thing arises strongly, to not look at the thing, but to look at what arises strongly. And that's the practice we have to just develop. And it's not an easy one, because, when you start getting angry, and what's wrong, Betty? He did this, and he said this, and I did this, and he said this, and then this, and I said, no, Betty, you're talking about him. What's wrong? What's going on in you? And we have to learn a new way to respond, which is, okay, it is called this, it's this, and it's this, and it's this. And so then looking at it, so then we can identify it more clearly, how it works, what it is, label it correctly. Now, fear is more subliminal, it's more deep than the anger, than the attachment, than the jealousy, than the pride, but it is beneath all of them. So in the way you're talking here as examples, fairly obvious ones, is again just looking at the whole business of trying to see the fear itself. This is one approach, which is the most direct, but the difficult one. But there's a multitude of other approaches. I mean, one of the ways to talk to ourselves is, if we say, I'm afraid of death, then to talk to yourself, well, everything is impermanent, it's the nature of it. I will die at some point, that is absolutely definite. I mean, to talk about it, because death is definite. Death is guaranteed. It is the one certain thing the one certain thing we can guarantee will happen between now and whenever, that we're going to die. A lot of people right now will die in 5 seconds, Dead, they're dead, right? And they were just like us sitting here not expecting to die. So we've got to think about impermanence. So one of the things is don't buy into the fear. Analyse it and be like your own therapist in there and start talking to yourself. If you're like a good friend coming to you for some advice, give yourself some advice. Because the fact is, death will happen. Death is definite. The time of death is uncertain. We have to think about it. So actually, then another approach to it is, if the fear arises, great, what a good opportunity. Do you see my point? Because it's realistic, you know. So go into it. Another way to say this is go into the fear. Go into it, you know. Talk about it. Don't just buy into it. Look into it. Look into it. Okay, what will happen? What's another one you said? Fear of what?
Being alone.
Okay, fear of being alone. This is a very interesting one, actually. Tell me about this one.
Well,
What's this mean? Is it only for old people, or do young people have this too?
No,
Tell me about this one. Because I know it's a very common one for people. Isn't this a common one for people? Fear of being alone?
I think
It is. Is it really?
I think at this point it might have been an age-related fear, older fear of being alone.
But I think that's what keeps most people in their lousy relationships, isn't it? Better to have some lousy person than have nobody. Isn't this true for many people? A bit depressing, isn't it?
Got one. What about the fear when you're going to lose yourself because the I is empty?
Well, that's a good fear too, because the fact is, you won't, the fact is you don't lose anything. You won't sort of disappear into a puff of smoke, which is the only way you're going to lose your eye, really, isn't it? In an absolute sense. If it is really true that you're going to lose your eye, then you will, at the time you realise emptiness, you'll disappear, just like that. Well, that's a fairly valid fear to have. But you won't. The point is you won't. That's my point. You won't disappear. Nothing will go except the fear. Because the fact is you do exist. But Buddhists are saying we've got the wrong way of understanding how we exist. The way we think we exist is a fantasy. And that's a real hard one to see, because we can't see it. It's very difficult. But so there's nothing to fear. The fact is, the Buddhist approach would be there is nothing to fear. There is nothing to fear. So that's just to say these words to ourselves sometimes, even if we don't know what it means, it's very, very consoling. It's very grounding, you know. But the fear of being alone, that's interesting. Fear of being alone.
I'm the one that brought that up.
Tell me about that one, Joan.
I just have... Didn't you get enough out of me with the depression?
Hello? Oh, girl, you're a good source of all these things, so come on. Well, tell us about this one.
I just all my life had a fear of being alone. And the joke of it is, I've been divorced for 20 years, and I've been on and off, except for relationships coming and going, as they have a way of doing. I've been, and this, I hate being alone. I get very fearful, very panicky. That's where my panic attacks come in if I'm alone. I'm okay for about a couple of hours. So I run here and there doing things, making sure I only get back home by about 9 o'clock at night, then watch a TV an hour or two, go to bed, up next morning and off again. And it's exhausting.
Well, tell me about what it is you're afraid of. What'll happen?
I don't know.
Well, that's the point, my dear. We've got to look at it.
Yeah, I know.
Well, then how about experimenting? How about experimenting and sitting in your house all day and not go anywhere and see what happens?
Yes.
Why not?
Well, I tried that for half a day, and I get terrorized. So by about 2 o'clock, I just flee out the house.
I know, but this is the whole...
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. This is just, a simple way of talking.
It's just a very real fear.
Yeah, of course it is, Joe.
And an extreme sadness. Extreme, not just light sadness. Extreme sadness.
So then, Joan, in general, like all of us, then you feel there must be something in there you need to investigate. We all need to investigate what's going on in this great big soup inside here, don't we?
Of course.
That's it, isn't it? So then, that's okay. So,
Yeah.
Because if it's not one thing, it's another that we are afraid of, and the fact is... Yeah, again, you see, in the West, we sort of think of fears as this isolated thing over there that doesn't bear any relationship to attachment over here. But the whole Buddhist model of the mind is very holistic. It's very kind of connected. Attachment isn't necessarily related to anger, to jealousy. They're all related to each other. They're all symptoms of the same problem, So even though it's, so fear is just the one that's beneath all of them. So it manifests in different ways for all of us, As long as...
Fine.
Go on, Mum.
I'm fine when I'm around people. I just feel so much better. And Song of Barbara Streisand, people who need people are the luckiest people in the world. It is so off.
Well, that's right. It's the opposite, isn't
Because
it?
it's better not to need
Of
people.
course, in the neurotic sense, yes.
Yeah.
In the neurotic sense, darling. That's exactly right. So, yeah, I mean, fear is, all I can say is it's just, we can see it, like you're expressing it in a strong way, specific way about being alone, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else would be fear of the dark. Someone else fear of, you know, being, a friend of mine has fear of being in a high building, you know. So we all have different stories, isn't it, in our minds, for whatever reason. But all it points to, for every one of us, we've got a lot of investigating to do, a lot of sorting out, a lot of looking inside, a lot of deconstructing, a lot of understanding to do.
Yes.
That's all.
I really have a lot of work to do.
That's it, sweetie pie. I'm
Yeah.
enjoying the club.
Next, please.
I remember as a little girl, when I used to go out, I'm sure I mentioned this before at some point, when the house when we lived in when I was a little girl, we had a toilet outside, you know. In Australia we call it the lavvy. You know how they say on the aeroplanes? It's most curious. On American aeroplanes they say what do they say? Lavatory. Lavatory. But everywhere else it's a bathroom. It's very curious. I mean, you use the most direct word on an aeroplane for some reason, but all these euphemisms everywhere else. Anyway, in Australia we used to call it, not the lavatory, the lavatory, but we call it for short the lavvy, you know. So the lavvy was outside. So they always shorten everything in Australia. They're very stupid. Ridiculous how they talk. Anyway, the lavvy was outside. And so when you open the back door, it was just to the left, like 3 steps to go to the toilet. But in front was the back garden. And every time I had to go to the toilet, it was scary, you know, because you had to walk out. And so it was fear of the dark, fear of this big black hole out there. And I used to think, if I walked into it, into the dark, right into the middle of the garden, I wouldn't be afraid, you know, because I'd be in the middle of it. So this is, I mean, it's just a way of saying something here. It's just because if you look at all our fears, whatever we call them, it's an idea about something that might happen, isn't it? So even fear of death is definite, but we're not, I mean, there's nothing to be afraid of in dying, but we have an idea about what it is. So being alone, and it's sort of fairly primordial for all of us, you know. So it's, one thing I'm saying here is the same point. Is to go into it, to walk into it, to look into it, to follow it through, to ask questions, just to look. I mean, there's a multitude of approaches, because in the end, these are all just symptoms of the unhappy way we all are with our crazy minds, you know. So to kind of have the courage to look into them, that's all. Because that's one thing I'm saying. Nothing, there's no magic technique, you know. Anyway, any other questions?
Yeah, I wanted to ask your the Buddhist definition of compassion.
Yes, absolutely. As we said, love looks at a person and you reach out to them and you want them to be happy. You delight, or you delight in their happiness. You see a person happy and it delights you. That's love. Compassion, you see a person and you see their suffering and you feel their pain. You have empathy for their suffering and you wish them not to suffer. That's compassion. Seeing the suffering of someone and wanting them not to suffer. So in other words, we have that now with people we're very close to. We feel their suffering and it pains us. You could say that's compassion.
What do you do if you don't feel their suffering? I mean, they say they're suffering, but you don't.
Well, I mean,
I
I understand.
imagine?
No. Okay, if you've had a headache, right? You've had a headache before, let's say?
Yeah.
And someone says, I've got a headache. Your friend says, I've got a headache. What would arise in your mind? Do you have a close friend?
I could imagine, yeah.
Do you have a close friend?
Yeah.
And they say they're suffering. They have a headache.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what a headache feels like, don't you?
Yeah.
So what would occur in your mind when they tell you I've got a headache? You probably say, well, take an aspirin.
I do.
Okay. That's right. No, I think, well, okay. Would you say that even just conceptually you have empathy with someone who's got some suffering? Would you, let's say you see some people suffering on the telly, you read the news and all these people have just got their houses bombed out, or you see pictures of crying people, and you can, even for a second you look at it and you imagine what it must be like and think, oh my God, how awful.
Yeah.
You ever had like that? Well, that's compassion. That's compassion. That's compassion.
So similar to the word empathy then.
Well, empathy is just a way we say it in the West, isn't it? You're connected. Empathy, empathetic means there's a sense of connection, isn't there?
Yeah.
Well, you could also say there's empathy if you love someone, couldn't you, really? Because the point of the point that the Buddha's making in his way of describing the positive qualities is that they're necessarily connected. There's a sense of connectedness to other. There's a sense of our reaching out and having a sense of connection with other. That's a characteristic of the positive states of mind. That's all. And so love would be when you see a person happy and it delights you. It opens your heart. Compassion is when you see their suffering and it pains you. So clearly it's a question of degree. And the point is, this is what Buddha is saying, we can develop these to phenomenal degrees. And compassion, finally, is the driving force of what a person who is fully developed is. It's this unbearable compassion for all living beings, as if they were yourself, or as if they're your most precious children. And so this concept of this bodhisattva is a person who totally devotes their life, their future lives, to the benefit of others, because their suffering is unbearable. So this is what we're attempting to develop. We're discussing here the very first stages of looking at the negative states of mind, which are the ones that separate us from others, that are overwhelmingly involved in the neurotic I. We're describing those right now. And the more we lessen those, the byproduct of that is necessary to feel more connected. And then when we do the compassion wing work, we actively even increase those positive qualities.
But if you feel someone else is suffering, how do you prevent yourself from getting carried away with it?
That's because delusion is involved. That's when the trouble is now, when we see someone else's suffering, because our own neurotic I is involved in it, we lose our common sense. We can't see what's going on, and it drags us down as well. That's no good. And that's how we are right now, to some extent. When you're really developed, I'm just using the example of a person who's developed to try and get it clear, when you've really gone beyond the I, gone beyond ego, gone beyond attachment and anger and pride and all your own neuroses, you just have this pure love and pure compassion, and there's no way you get dragged down. There's no way you lose any. You're very, in other words, wisdom, this idea of wisdom is what you get when you get rid of your own delusions. So the more, and it's practical. Think about, right now the Buddha's saying that all these unhappy states of mind are polluting all of our experiences, are polluting our own happiness, and polluting our capacity to make others happy. But they're so just utterly there. And then because in the West we assume they're normal and don't question them, you see what I'm saying here? Whereas the Buddha's view is we need to look at them because they're not normal in the sense that they're pollution and they cause us suffering, and that we can go beyond them. So the more we can, in our own right, like right now in a relationship, let's say you have a lot of attachment to somebody. Let's say it's a love relationship, a lover, and you're so attached to this person. Well then, our own attachment, our own needs are so caught up in every way we respond to that person. And let's say it's a child especially. People tell me, I haven't had a child. But, you're so much attachment and love for this child, but you lose your common sense. You just haven't got common sense. And that's what the delusions do. They distort us. Whereas when you've got the delusions out of the way, one, you're a very whole, fulfilled, content person, and two, you're really, really wise because you're no longer being distorted. You can see very clearly what's going on, and if you have to make some choices about how to help a person, it's very wise to see. It's very wise advice because it's not coming from your own stuff. And then if it's compassion, and as you develop this, your heart is huge. And you'd feel the pain of others, but you'd also have this other level of compassion, and we'll go and talk more about this, which is the one that they call great compassion, which is it's my job. What can I do to take it away? There's this very strong sense of responsibility and a wholesome sense. So then you've got to, you won't ever lose your common sense. You won't ever, because wisdom gives great strength to your compassion. Right now our compassion is very wishy-washy. It's very weak. It's ego-based. And when it's very strong compassion for a person we're attached to, it drags us down. We all drown together, Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Again, it's making this distinction between the positive and the negative states of mind. This is the point. It's crucial all the time in the Buddhist understanding. So I mean, I can see for myself, like, right, going to, working with people in prison. I mean, I'm not saying I've got much wisdom, but I can see the extent to which I've done any work at all on my own mind is the extent to which I can be useful to others and not get dragged down, because it's pretty intense, the suffering. And I mean, the letters we get, I mean, in our office, we get 300 letters every month from people in prison. And it's just this kind of extraordinary experience, picking up every one of these letters. There's something extraordinary in there. These mostly working class, uneducated, desperate people, I mean, a letter like one guy writes and said, I think I really need someone to communicate with. I just heard that my wife is, he's just been told he's got a life sentence and he's got AIDS. His wife is dying of cancer, his daughter's just been put in prison. I think I need someone to talk to. I mean, like intense, always dramatic, intense experiences of suffering, And if you're going to be wavering a bit and your own kind of needs going to be too involved, you're going to get exhausted. You can't possibly help anybody. Yeah. So we've got to keep some real common sense, some strength, but at the same time keep your heart open. And that's what compassion mixed with wisdom is. And I can really see that to whatever extent I've understood my own mind, understood anger and the delusions, and of course from the Buddhist perspective understood karma, then you have this strong sense of almost like respectfully allowing that this is this person's experiences. And like a neurotic mother would, rush in and try and make it all better. You don't have that view. That's compassion which is mixed with not wisdom. Yeah. Oh, I must fix it all. I must make it all go away because we can't bear it, Yeah. Whereas if we realise this person's experience, due to their actions, they've got this experience. But there you are watching and you're involved. You can do what you can, and sometimes you can't do much, but you do what you can and be happy with this. And what you're doing, and that's the point too. The best way to help anybody is to give them the tools to help themselves. And that's the way the Buddhist is talking about compassion. If we feel like a mother who has to make it all go away, that's a disaster. Because you're just kind of taking the responsibility away from that person. Yeah. But you're giving people tools to use themselves. And then you realise it's their responsibility, It's their responsibility. I mean, I'm talking now the mind, Yeah. Sure, if someone is sick and they need your medicine, give it to them, And then people often say to me, oh, well, what are the people you've been helping all these years and they stop being Buddhist, or they... Well, I think that's completely fine. I have no vested interest in people being Buddhist. You give them tools, and if for a year they're a Buddhist, or 5 years, and it works for them, fantastic. But if they go off and become a better Christian, I'm so happy, So, again, this is attachment. Attachment has a lot of vested interest in how you help people, and they better be appreciative of your help, and they better be helped in the way you want them to be, and they better turn out in the way you want them to turn out. That's attachment talking. Whereas if you're simply giving them tools that have worked for you, and then they use those tools, fantastic. You can relax, You're doing the job. That's the best way to help people. And that can come only from wisdom. Wisdom here in the same sense that if you want to teach a person how to play piano, you have to have the wisdom of knowing how to play the piano yourself. You can't help them otherwise, Yeah. So compassion, sure, some people have a very strong emotional compassion, and that's fantastic. They will cry when they see suffering. I'm not like that. I sound a bit like you. We're a bit hard-hearted, I think, I mean, don't cry when we see suffering. I don't cry when I see suffering. I don't feel I've got all this compassion, the way we think about it often. But the more I work with the Buddhist one, it's really it's all very rational. But you join that with the heart, and eventually the heart will come along, So it's okay. Someone else? Yeah. Okay, sweetheart, this thing. Use it, you.
No, this way, here.
Okay, you need. Go. That's fine.
My question is on desire, and because I know desire leads to attachments, but isn't there any type of good desires? Isn't there a differential between bad desires and good?
I understand. Well, just technically speaking, in Buddhist psychology, the word desire and the word attachment are the same.
Oh.
Just we can see we use them in different contexts, certainly in our Western culture, don't we? Mm-hmm. So, strictly speaking, what's called attachment or desire is a delusion. All the stuff we've been talking about. So, when you learn Buddhist psychology, the word that's the closest translation to, just speak in our terms. To want something is not necessarily attachment. Put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. We use that word in the West, so we think if you're attached means you shouldn't want anything. But that's not the point. I mean, you've got to want something. You won't even, I've got to want to walk out that door before my legs will take me.
Mm-hmm.
So to say that that's attachment means I can't even want to walk out the door, excuse me. So attachment, so my example when Dad and I go to order our chocolate cake. Please may we have chocolate cake? And then carrot cake comes. He says, cool, I can handle carrot cake. That means he didn't have attachment.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't expecting it. He didn't have all this neurotic expectation. He wasn't dependent upon it coming. Do you understand my point? Whereas if my response is anger and upset, that proved I had attachment to getting a chocolate cake. That's the point.
But don't you both have desires for chocolate cake when you order it to begin with?
But I just said wanting something is not attachment.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You see my point? Just wanting something.
Okay.
We want chocolate cake. We're human. We have bodies. We have tongues. Tongues like, certain cultures like certain foods. Americans like their jelly and peanut butter, and Australians like their Vegemite.
Okay.
Tibetans like their yak cheese,
Okay.
So it's just sort of on a relative level, there's a relative reality. Okay, we could say, and this is certainly the Buddhist approach, attachment goes to extremely subtle levels.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, given that we're human with human bodies and eat and do this and go here and like this and prefer this and want this instead of that, it doesn't have to be attachment. That's the point.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's difficult, especially with strong objects.
Right.
I mean, to say to an alcoholic, oh, well, you don't have to be attached to it, but you can still enjoy it. Forget about it. It's too intense. Best to leave it alone.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah. So to want something is perfectly reasonable.
Okay.
I mean, you've got to want, to practice a spiritual path in order to even do it. You've got to want to, like I said, to even walk out the door, you have to want to walk out the door. You've got to make the decision, intend to walk out the door. The mind has to decide, I'm going to walk out the door. The mind has to decide, I'm going to go to this Buddhist class. Now let's say you're attached to coming to this class, which means that when you get disturbed on the road and the tree falls over and you can't get there, you burst into tears and stamp and shout and yell and get upset. That means you're attached to it, neurotic, Do you see my point?
Mm-hmm.
Speaking simply. But wanting, you've got to want to do something, to achieve something. You've got to want. Especially you've got to want to, if you're trying to develop your qualities, you've got to want to develop your qualities. That's not the same as attachment. Completely not. You see, it's huge, extremely important point. Also, attachment is not when you say, oh, I like chocolate cake. It's perfectly reasonable, due to the way you've been brought up, to have a tendency to prefer chocolate cake to carrot cake. Mm-hmm. It's still a relative reality that is totally fine. Again, the attachment to it is this intense, neurotic, dependent neediness for it, such that if you don't get it, you'll freak out. So they're distinct, See, this is the particular way that Buddhism talks. I think we just need to get used to thinking this way, because we don't think like this generally in the world, I think. We don't distinguish certainly something that I call attachment as a delusion. We use many other ways.
I have a question. How do you get, a practice going? I mean, I'm totally convinced by now, but, I'm like totally lost. Where do I go from here?
I understand.
How do you work with someone? I mean, is there any guidance or, because I'm just on the fringes.
I understand. Absolutely, I understand. Well, it's like, just say you're at a music class hearing about music and you've decided you'd like to study music. Well, you go find a course, don't you? And you get a piano or a flute and you start doing a bit of practice every day. So you have to have discipline. You have to do, discipline to do some every day. So here we're talking practice. Here means, you go to some places where you can learn. I mean, different, let's just say it's called Buddhism that you find is appealing. There's all kinds of ways that Buddhism is taught in different situations, So you've got to find the style that suits you, or you get what you can from wherever you can until let's say you're not sure if you like jazz or classical, you do a bit of both until you decide where you fit, So even the same with Buddhism, you can go to centres and you read books and you start with a simple meditation practice in the morning and night. It's not as if that's the only thing that's called practice, but it's good to have a structure, because we need a structure. It helps our mind. So you just start with something in the morning, something at night, do some reading, go to a course, and you just gradually get into the habit of daily practice, which is looking at your mind and changing it.
One more.
Yes.
How do you have perseverance without attachment?
Well, how do you have perseverance without attachment? How do you enjoy chocolate cake without attachment? I mean, how do we do anything without attachment? It's extremely difficult. Some, but all we can do is practice. All we can do is do it, and then learn from it, learn from our mistakes. So, perseverance. Yeah, I mean, the reason to persevere at something, isn't it, is because you've decided to do it, right? Isn't it? And the reason you've decided to do something because you can see the benefits of it, right? So if you want to you want to go off and be a gymnast, and you have to imagine what it's like to be a gymnast. You see the other gymnasts, and you aspire to be like this. So of course, in the worldly sense, we're usually totally motivated by attachment. That's the main energy.
Yeah.
That's the main energy that motivates most of us. It's to fame and fortune and good reputation and being the best and all that. But you can still say at the same time, it is really important for us to develop our potential, and it's important for us to develop our own sense of who we are and accomplish something. It is important. But it's but the Buddhist approach to it would be this: that if we really learn to look at what is important, then you don't define it by the external activity. You define it by the mind. So what is really important is developing your qualities and benefiting others. That's the two things. Didn't I say this yesterday? You can use two reasons for doing something, finally. Two reasons, if you think internally. If I choose to do this thing, let's say become a gymnast, let's say, will it help me lessen attachment, lessen anger, lessen pride, lessen jealousy, increase love, increase compassion, which is how to benefit me? Or even more so, will it help me help others in that way? Now, if the answer is yes, then you do it. If the answer is no, then you don't. Because the bottom line is, whatever external activity we choose to do, if we're not developing our internal qualities, it's a useless action. It's a useless activity. If what we do increases our attachment, it's like eating poison. It's a total and utter waste of time. So, when you're really clear about this, the more you think about the mind and what a positive state of mind is and what a negative state of mind, what you're doing is getting clear motivation. You're getting your reasoning really clear. Why am I doing this? And if you can see from doing whatever you choose to do that you actually increase your qualities and can benefit others, then you're on the right track. And when you know that's the real job you're trying to do, the gymnast is just the catalyst. The gymnast is just a means you're using to develop yourself and benefit others. Then you get very focused on the benefit of it, and then you get enthusiasm. So the motivation is the key. The understanding of what you're trying to achieve. And the bottom line, again, in Buddhism is you're trying to develop your qualities and benefit others. That's it. You can't say there's anything else. That includes the entire universe. In other words, anything you do, if it increases your delusions, it's obviously not the right thing to do. Now that's a tough one, because that is a tough one for us. That's the point, So clearly you can make certain choices, like if, you better stop working at the gun factory, because a gun factory is where it directly harms others, and your motivation isn't enough to make that a good action, probably. You've got a pure motivation to benefit yourself and benefit others, and you're producing things that shoot people. It just seems a little bit difficult, So best probably not to do an action like that. This is my point. But virtually anything else, you can work in the toilet paper factory, and you can work in wherever you want and really have a pure motivation and want to benefit the people around you, and you practice humility and you practice patience and you're developing your qualities. That's marvellous. It's part of your practice, Fantastic.
And enthusiasm comes.
Enthusiasm comes from when you see the benefit of what you're trying to achieve. So when you're convinced from listening and thinking that you don't have a choice but to develop your qualities, and you don't have a choice but to get rid of your delusions and to benefit others, when you really know that's the bottom line, then you know that to do anything else will only harm you, then you're going to have enthusiasm for it. But it's got to be based on this type of thinking, very logical, very grounded, very clear, The trouble is with spiritual practice, because we have all these very vague notions about what it is. Oh, I better meditate because someone says it's good for you, and I want to be calm, and I don't, and we don't really have enough logical, really to say this, reasoning for doing it. So it's too ephemeral. Our reasons are too ephemeral, and then after a while we get bored, so we don't have enthusiasm because we can't really see why we're doing it. We're confused. Oh, someone says ice skating is good for you. Oh, all right, but until you're absolutely clear about what ice skating is and what it will bring you and what the advantages are, you won't have enthusiasm. Are you seeing my point? Mm-hmm. Those little baby gymnasts, little tiny little things like this, little girls, little ice skaters, they're 4 years old and they're so focused on what they want. I'm talking in general terms now. They've got enormous enthusiasm and they never vary and they never waver on it. So in broad terms, you've got to know what it is you're trying to achieve and why you're achieving it, and that's what gives you the determination to continue.
Because the attachment wears out.
Precisely. That's why most people give up most things. Oh, that looks exciting. Oh, look at that, Oh, I'll get happy if I do that. Oh, God, what a drag 6 weeks later, So you give up, bored. Because attachment, either, when finally attachment gives up, it becomes aversion, and you just can't stand it, or it becomes boredom. There's only three. The three root delusions, attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And the main characteristic of this ignorance in this context is total indifference, boredom, couldn't care less. It's like you wake up one day and you see this ugly bloke in your bed. First of all, it was huge attachment, this divine, gorgeous being. One day you wake up, he looks really ugly. Or one day you wake up, he looks really boring. That's it. We go between attachment, aversion, ignorance. Attachment, aversion, ignorance. Swaying between them. Mostly attachment and aversion, but the ignorance is there, the aversion. So we've got to be beyond that, Because to achieve anything is hard work. So unless you've got a really clear reason for why you're doing it, when it gets tough, you're going to give up. And so enthusiasm is going beyond that. Someone else? That's it. Okay. Let's talk about this compassion wing, I think. The way, you can think that this wisdom wing work is, it's sort of like, okay, all the things you're doing, in all this path from A to Z, you're working on yourself. You're working on your mind. But the way to characterize the work of the wisdom wing is that you're focusing on the pollution and you're trying to get rid of it. You're focusing on the delusions, on the causes of suffering. So it can be quite intense. If you lose sight of what you're doing, it sounds very depressing. All these Buddhists, all they do is go on about suffering, suffering, suffering. Can't we talk about something nice, please, sort of thing. But we have to remember why we are looking at the delusions, why we want to identify attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, fear, investigate them and then go beyond them. We need to, because they're the source of the suffering. And the job is to try and get rid of suffering. So we have to become very, very familiar with them. We have to understand them very deeply. But it's in the context of developing your marvellous qualities. So that's the reasoning. The reason you want to get your hands dirty in the pollution is so you can have nice pure water. If you forget that, then you've lost the plot, The reason to get involved in delusions, which is the wisdom wing work, is so you can become astonishingly happy and content and fulfilled and marvellous, which is your potential. That's your reason for doing it. You've got to keep that as a reference point all the time. So the way to do that from the wisdom wing point of view is to work on the delusions, to understand your mind really well. It's a really fiercely inner job, So you could say from the wisdom wing point of view, when you're doing specifically that inner work, what we have to develop, and I mentioned this before, what we have to develop is this skill to always be aware of what is arising inside and to learn to become deeply familiar with it. In order to understand it, in order to deconstruct it, in order to go beyond it. That's the job. So from that point of view, you could say, other people are not your business. Back off. Leave them alone, you know. Because delusions are totally caught up with other people. Finding fault, craving after them, criticising them, desperate to be, attached to them. The delusions are totally caught up in the outside world. We've got to back away from the outside world and start looking in the inside world. That's the inner work. That's the wisdom wing. And this is a tough job because we are so addicted to going on about this and he said this and she this and blah this, because the delusions in their nature are involved in others out there, things, experiences, stuff like this. So we have to practice. And this itself is a huge job. Becoming aware of what's arising inside here. So look how we are now, let's say you check on your day. Oh, how'd you go today, Robina? Oh, really good, Or, oh, it was a lousy day, or whatever. So, then you describe it. Well, you describe it in external terms, don't you? At 9 o'clock I did this, and 10 o'clock I, went shopping, and 11 o'clock I kicked the dog, and 12 o'clock I spoke to my mum, and 1 o'clock I was, you understand, we track our day in external terms. We track our life in these terms. We think of happiness and suffering in the external terms. What we have to practice doing is tracking our life in, internal terms. Well, at 9 o'clock I was jealous, and 10 o'clock I was loving, and 11 o'clock I was depressed, and 12 o'clock I, internal. And this is a tough one. I mean, like I said before in Betty, when the anger arises or the fear arises, that what we do is we immediately go to the story. What's wrong, Betty? He did this, and he did this, and he said this, and he did this. What's not helpful? It's like someone just stabbed you. What's wrong, Betty? Then you describe the knife. Well, it's 7 inches long and it's very pointy. Excuse me, who cares? You're bleeding to death, Who cares what kind of knife it is? Who cares who put it there? Deal with what's here. That's the wisdom wing. That's the inner therapy. That's being your own therapist. This is the job. That's the wisdom wing job. Other people are not your business. Back off. Leave them alone. Get out of their heads, Now, from the compassion wing point of view, you can say you are not your business and people are your business. People now are the grist for the mill for you to develop your positive qualities. Another way to say it, really, the wisdom wing is like pulling out the weeds. The compassion wing is growing the flowers. The work is the same. It's all internal. It's just a different emphasis, So, the bottom, what we're trying to achieve on the compassion wing is to develop simply love and compassion, what they call love and what they call compassion. Love and compassion. Love is seeing others and wanting them to be happy. Compassion is seeing others and wanting them not to suffer. This is a simple way of summarising what we're trying to develop on the wisdom, on the compassion wing. In other words, this connectedness with others. Eventually, the Buddha would say, we have the capability of having this spontaneous affection and compassion for other beings, all other beings without exception, equally, as if they were one's most precious child. Now again, as I'm saying, Buddha's quite radical in what he is asserting we can achieve. This sounds quite shocking. In ordinary worldly terms, we think, well, excuse me, that's Mother Teresa's job. I'm not a saint, give me a break. A few weirdos like Mother Teresa get born and they love all beings or something. We don't see it as as something attainable. We don't go to courses to how to love everybody. Love my husband and my few kids is good enough, thanks. That's hard enough. What Buddha's saying is that just naturally, the potential of the mind, of consciousness, is to be connected to all beings. In fact, until we are, the mind is still polluted. Because he says it's utterly unnatural. That the sense we have now of this universe full of me's and others is a totally unnatural, invented thing. It's completely fabricated by delusions. It's a product of delusions. When the mind is fully depolluted, it will just naturally be interconnected with others, oneness with others, all these nice phrases, Buddha would say this is just how it is. So until we've achieved this, you could say we will never be satisfied. So what is preventing us from feeling connected to others is very obvious, is the delusions. So on the wisdom wing, we're working at a very specific level on those delusions. On the compassion wing, we continue to work on them, but with a different emphasis, We're still talking in the same way. So, okay, the foundation practice on this compassion wing is the development of what's called equanimity. So like in all of these terms, it's defined very specifically, This equanimity is this heartfelt recognition from much contemplating, which we'll describe, this heartfelt recognition that enemies, friends and strangers, and when we look at this, there's no fourth category, that enemies, friends and strangers are in fact equal, contrary to the current state that we experience, which is that they're completely unequal. But enemy, friend and stranger are actually, from their point of view, equal to each other. Now we can see 27 different ways that they're equal, but the really specific point here is they're equal from the point of view of wanting to be happy. This is a really focused point. They're equal from the point of view of wanting to be happy. Why this? Very logical. Because gradually what we're moving towards on the compassion wing is the wish that others be happy, which is what is love, which is what love is. The spontaneous wish that others be happy. Now, you can't want another person to be happy until you can see that, until you can see that they want to be happy. Because right now, like we said, we do love our friends, but it's unstable because it's based on attachment. So when we can establish this by much contemplating and much thinking, that they're equal in wanting to be happy, that's really stable. Then we can gradually build up this affection, this love for all of them, from our side, wanting them equally to be happy. So as you can hear, all this approach we're discussing here, there are many approaches in Buddhism, but this way of looking at Buddha's philosophy, looking at Buddha's way of describing things, you really can say it's to do with being very rational, very logical, very clear. It's all grounded in that. And we're including the development of love and compassion. The starting point, the type of analysis, inner work we have to do is based on clear thinking. What comes from this is then very stable development of genuine loving feelings, compassionate feelings. Right now you could say, we're very convinced. We've used over eons of time, Buddha would say, logic of ego, the logic of ego. So naturally we have attachment, and just naturally we have depression and fear and jealousy, because we've lived according to that logic for so long. Now it's spontaneous. We have to break that down, see the illogic of it, argue with ego's illogical views, and come up with new thinking, which in the beginning is quite tentative because it's not natural to us, but eventually with practice it becomes very stable. And then on the basis of that, we then develop the feelings with practice, So how do you get this equanimity? Well, as we're talking, just think it. Just imagine in your mind 3 people in front of you. One is an enemy right in front of you, the person you don't like, the person who harms you, who has harmed you, let's say, or whom you haven't forgiven. To the left in front of you is a dear friend, and the right in front of you is a stranger, a person whose face you can see enough, whom you can recognize, but about whom you're really indifferent. Now let's look at these 3 categories, because, in the same way that we talked in general, the 3 main delusions, attachment, aversion and ignorance, we can see that in terms of beings, the 3 objects of these delusions are enemies, friends and strangers. And there is no 4th category. There are those you do like, whom you're attached to. Why? Because they do what you want, basically. They suit you. They suit your needs. I'm not being cruel, just looking at the meaning of attachment. So they're the ones we love. We want them to be happy. Then you have those that are called enemies. And what's an enemy? By definition, it's a person who doesn't do what you want, who does what you don't want, who harms you, whatever. That's an enemy. Whom you don't love, and whom you might even actually want to suffer, if you really dislike them, we can see the tendency for this. Then you've got strangers, and who are they? Well, by definition, a stranger is a person who neither harms nor helps you. It's so simple, isn't it? So it's a bit embarrassing when we think about it like this, but these are just stories made up by the delusions. They're attachments, stories, But it's the way the world is. We take it for granted. We don't question it. Everyone has a few friends, their family, and their close people, and they're the ones they support. And then there are those who, offend you, and you don't support them, and then all the rest we couldn't care less about. And that's 99.99% of the entire universe are strangers, isn't it? So what Buddha's saying is this is really unnatural, this is really limited, it's narrow, it's a delusions story made up by delusions, completely unnatural, and it's the source of suffering. So we have to try and go beyond this. So the very first step, this foundation, is to get to see this logic that actually they're all equal from their point of view. From my point of view, no, they're not equal. It's very obvious they're not. There are some people who definitely harm us. We can't say they don't. There are some people who are extremely kind to us, and the vast majority do know that. That's clear. But to use that as your basis for wanting them to be happy is what Buddha's saying. It's pretty limited. It's ego-based completely. It's based on attachment. So it's unstable. So in other words, how do you break all this down? So this really, let me just talk here for a minute about the way, certainly in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the way they talk about meditation. It's very interesting. So like I said, first of all, from Buddhist point of view, they're just psychological techniques. They're just very skillful techniques for, ways of using the mind. That's all. Ways of using the mind. The word in Tibetan for meditation actually is the word gom, and it means to familiarize. It's a verb, to familiarize. To familiarize, which is surprising. When we think of meditate, we have all these different concepts, but the broad meaning is to familiarize. Well, to familiarize what with what? Well, it's to familiarize your mind with positive states of mind. You're practicing developing positive states of mind. That's what it means. Simply that. Or you could say, you're familiarizing your mind with what is accurate. Because as we're pointing out, one of the Buddha's views about these unhappy states of mind, they have two characteristics. We haven't discussed this too much actually, not today. We can see with the negative state of mind, one for sure is extremely disturbing to oneself. When you're angry, when you're jealous, when you're depressed, it's so painful. That's fairly evident. But there's this other characteristic. We're implying it all the way, but we haven't actually stated it too much. And it's delusional. When we're caught up in depression or anger or jealousy or pride, it's based in fear and it's delusional. It's actually making up a story that isn't accurate. That's the interesting aspect of these unhappy states of mind. They're a bunch of liars that we're completely convinced are telling us the truth. In other words, when you have attachment in your mind, that chocolate cake will look far more delicious than it really is. When you've got attachment to that person, she will appear truly divine. And then you make up this huge story about what she can do for you. You give all this power to her. She's going to make me happy when I get her, when I have this, I'll do that, and get this and get that. It's this great big elaborate story. And basically, they're delusional stories. They're complete distortions. They're not accurate assessments at all. This is very, very important to understand. When we begin to see this characteristic of these unhappy states of mind, it really shows us how we're caught up in suffering, because they're liars. So what Buddha's saying is right now our minds are completely familiar with with delusions, with what isn't accurate, and with the negative. We've practiced these to perfection for so long. We've basically familiarized our mind with these. So we have to familiarize our mind with the positive now. We have to change the mind. So, really a way to say what meditation means here is you've got to brainwash yourself. It sounds so silly to say it like that, but that's the meaning. You're learning to see things differently. You're learning to see things differently. You're learning to deconstruct the delusion's way of seeing things and to reconstruct the virtuous, positive, beneficial states of mind's ways of seeing things. This is the job you're trying to do. So the first kind of meditation is called concentration meditation, as we've already discussed. Concentration. And what you're doing in this first mode of meditation is learning to train the mind, basically, to be a useful tool. You're trying to calm it, still it, focus it. Because if you want to make a cake, you've got to have some concentration. If you forget that you put the eggs in 2 seconds ago, you're in big trouble. You've got to have focus and concentration so you can stay on what you're doing. Well, if you're going to have to look into your mind and look at it very deeply and go inside and deconstruct and reconstruct, you've got to have decent focus, And the more refined your mind can be, the better the job you can do. So this process of familiarizing your mind with the positive, this happens in the second mode of meditation. The first mode is really where you're training your mind to be focused, which itself, as I've been saying, brings great benefit, immediate. So the second mode of meditation, you can call it broadly insight meditation. Insight. Now, this is where you do the job of deconstructing the negative and reconstructing the positive, breaking down all the nonsense stories that the delusions tell us that we believe totally in as the truth, that lead us up garden paths and cause us suffering, and then to break that down and then to build up the positive states of mind, to familiarize our mind with those. So the method, in this type of meditation we're describing here, the one of listening to all these approaches and then thinking it through, this method, in other words, of being your own therapist, is called analysis. And it's very simple. They call it analysis. Like whoever called it analysis. Who used that term psychologically? Who was it who first came up with that? That was Freud. Okay, well, this is the term they use. Tibetan Buddhism. The method you're using to change your mind is called analysis. You think something through. You think something through. But what this does, what insight means, it's very interesting. Insight, don't think of it as some religious experience. We mightn't use this in daily terms. We sort of do a bit, don't we? When you get some insight into something, it means you get to understand it, doesn't it? You get it. Oh, I get it. That's insight, isn't it? Well, that's all we're trying to do. We're trying to get insight into karma, insight into love, insight into compassion. You're trying to get it. You're trying to have it, this conceptual knowledge become experiential. When you hear the recipe and then you can make the cake. Insight is when you make the cake. Insight is when you get it, even at whatever level, or you get it, I see, when it becomes experiential. So the process of analysis, utilizing logic basically to argue with ego's crazy views, slowly triggers insights, and these deepen ever more, ever more, ever more. So this process we understand perfectly. We're using it all the time in our daily life to learn everything we learn. We don't call it meditation, that's all. So, okay, there are other kinds of meditation where you focus the mind, where you don't do the conceptualizing, you don't do the analysis, and I'll explain this, and you have visualizing, all kinds. But the purpose of all is the same, to change your mind, to familiarize your mind with the positive, to defamiliarize your mind from the negative, This is the whole purpose. So in terms of here, developing love and compassion, we're basically doing little contemplation, little visualizations of certain things and then thinking things through, until eventually it becomes experiential. It's, like I said, it's a process we already understand. So this very first one is one of equanimity. You'd imagine in front of you an enemy, a friend, and a stranger. And then for however long you'd want to do it, you'd take one and then you'd think things through. You'd look at, okay, what do I mean by enemy? You'd analyse, what do I mean by enemy? Well, you'd check. Enemy means a person who doesn't do what I want. Enemy is a person who harms me. And then you look at the logic of why we say enemy. Well, what is an enemy? We have a catalogue of reasons. I call this person mean because why? They did this, and this to me. That's the logic, isn't it? That's ego's reasoning for why this person is now a person we don't like, a person for whom we have aversion, even a person for whom we're really against, with whom we're angry, even a person we want to suffer if it's really strong anger. And let's face it, look at the world, plenty of that. So what all Buddha's saying is that the reasonings we use now, which are so intuitive for us, we don't even think of it as reasoning, for why we don't like this person, are completely baseless. They're baseless. They're baseless from a realistic point of view, but they're based on ego. They're ego's story. They're attachment's story. Which is tough to hear. It feels painful, because it's sort of like we're thinking Buddha's saying, you mean it's okay to harm somebody? He's not saying that. Again, it's bringing up this point that right now, because of delusions, the logic we use, which is faultless for us, is, well, of course I'm angry. He did this. We just think it is natural and reasonable. Because we have the logic that we suffer because someone else does something that I don't want. We don't ever question that logic, and that's what Buddha's talking, remember, in the wisdom when we're looking at that. So basically he's saying here that just because a person harms me, there's no logical reason to not want them to be happy. And equally, a friend. This sounds even more ridiculous. What Buddha's saying is, excuse me, Robina, just because a person is kind to you is not the right reason to love them. Which is interesting, isn't it? We don't even question that. So what Buddha's saying, remember, is the reason to love somebody is because they want to be happy. So what we're trying to establish in this equanimity one is not even love and compassion yet. It's simply this reasonable attitude, this view that can see that they're equal in their wish to be happy. So, different ways you can discuss this. You think this enemy, you can see very clearly that this enemy wasn't always an enemy. This person was your best friend at some point. And it might have been your child, whom you adored when they were a young child, sweet, little beautiful things, so gorgeous, adored them. They adored you, look with their big eyes at you, loving mummy, loving daddy. Such a feeling of confidence with you. And then suddenly now they've grown up and they can't stand you. So you hate them because they're mean to me, they've done this, they've done that, and now they become your enemy, Well, they weren't always enemy. They were your friend once, when you adored them and loved them then. So there's no stability, One minute you think they're great, next minute you don't. And what's the reason? Because now they've been mean to you. They haven't changed, actually. They're the same person. Same wish to be happy, same constipation, same, different this, same that, same headaches, same person. It's just that something shifted in their mind or in yours in relation to each other. So now we see a different picture. Because it's I-based. This person was your friend once. One minute you love them, next minute you don't. So from this point of view, we can see there's no inherent enemy. They can't, right now we think enemy, this mean person. When we hear their name, when we hear their voice, when we hear about them, this ugly feeling comes. This ugly picture arises in our mind, doesn't it? This mean person. And it's really uncomfortable for us. We really believe that's true, don't we? We believe it's a truth. Meaning, we believe it's an objective truth. This is the real person. I mean, look at let's say the one of people don't like George Bush, let's say, especially politicians. We can really see this. We really, if you don't like George Bush, and you might, I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't, I'm just talking. People, when you don't like someone like that, you're really convinced, aren't you, that it is the real picture. He is this stupid, ignorant, of all the cartoons you see with his monkey ears and everything, people really say he's a stupid person, he's this, and everybody who thinks that all agree. And whenever you think George Bush, you think that picture. When you see his face, you see that ignorance, you hear his words, you pick that part of him out. Now, how can it be objective truth? There are a lot of people who love what he says. A lot of people who find him a really good human being, who find him very moral and trustworthy. Are people who like him. When they see him, they get happy. So, okay, if you don't like George Bush, you put all of them into the same category as him and think they're all stupid. Because our picture is correct, isn't it? This is the point. We think we are right, Now, this doesn't mean he is right in dropping bombs. You can still argue objectively that it's inappropriate to drop bombs. But one of the ways delusions work, as we can see, is because this person did this, this, and this, we then define the whole person by that. Now, you check what we were talking before. That's how we do it to ourselves. We pick out the worst parts of ourselves I'm a depressed person, I'm an angry person. And we have this really low view of ourselves. Well, that's what we're doing to other people. Because of this, this and this, they are that. And then that view of the mind blinds us from seeing other aspects. Now, my feeling is George Bush, has got many good qualities. How can you say he's not? In just the same way, when we went Osama bin Laden, all the fuss and bother about him, he's on every second magazine, and they all call him this sleazy, mean monster. And the words that were describing him. And you look at his face, he's just a human being. And you read things about Osama bin Laden. He's very compassionate to his people. He sacrifices his life for them. He gives all his money to them. He has great compassion for all these other Muslim people. He's got incredible qualities. He just happens to hate the people we like, that's all. If you're against him. So it's so distorted how we see people. He's got many good qualities. George Bush has got many good qualities. Certain things they do might not be appropriate. But just like with yourself, certain things you do might not be appropriate. But the ego defines you by those things. So then you think, oh, I'm bad. So mistaken. Not accurate. Not accurate. So delusions are emotional, they're hysterical, they're exaggerating, they're ridiculous, they're not accurate, So when we have the picture of friend, enemy, stranger, it's very, very rigid, fixed truth for us. Because, and this is what's fascinating, by the way, when you study the way Buddha talks about the mind, you study Buddhist psychology. And what they say is, this is most fascinating, that what is in the object, let's say it's George Bush. The object, this is how they say it, it's kind of quaint, takes on the aspect of whatever's in the mind. So if you have aversion in your mind, the object you're looking at looks ugly. Now this is surprising to us because we think, well, excuse me, George Bush is ugly. You understand my point? We don't think it's our mind seeing him this way, but this is the point that Buddha's making, which is totally interesting, and we can prove it again and again. That guy you were in love with 6 months ago, he looked divine to you, didn't he? He made you faint at the thought of him. Meaning, that object took on the aspect of what was in your mind, in this case, attachment. Attachment's like, your rose-coloured spectacles. Whatever you see through the medium of your attachment looks divine. The chocolate cake, whatever. So that's why Buddha says our mind makes things up. He's not being cosmic. It's quite literally true. When attachment is there, it causes the cake to look delicious. I mean, this is totally interesting. Because as far as we're concerned, the cake is delicious. From its own side, isn't it? We're just sitting here like some victim, Cake appears delicious to us. Vibrating deliciousness, sort of demanding I eat it. You see my point, isn't it? Well, there's a gorgeous person out there. A person who, let's say, has got a lot of sexual attachment. There's you men, isn't it, for these women, right? From female, and the classic kind of story of the poor guys, they just can't help it, these gorgeous-looking girls, So this gorgeous-looking girl body, right, there it is out there. You don't think your mind is making it look delicious to you, do you? You think that girl has got this gorgeous body. And it's quite sort of accusing. I remember it was very funny actually. I remember years ago, when I was living in London, I was a feminist actually. I was a very radical feminist. I didn't like men at all. I used to hit them. And I remember this, if they said something wrong to me, I'd dress as I liked with my, my rounded chest and everything. And so of course, certain men would say certain things, right? It wasn't seen as politically incorrect then. And I remember this guy in some part of London saying something about my body, my chest. And I abused him, and he almost cried. He was so upset. And he said, well, why do you dress like that? What I mean was, this is what attachment does. In his mind, he's got all these fantasies, right? All this trip about female bodies. But he doesn't think it's coming from his mind. Because very common response, the typical male-female one, when we see it in a really stupid way, kind of, well, they deserve it, If you dress like that, Robina, with your chest poking out, you deserve to be insulted by a man, Because it's sort of like, this is what attachment is saying. That I'm this victim walking along, and this person dares to walk along with a chest, Are you hearing the point I'm making? So this is the whole blame one. So poor innocent victim men who've got a lot of attachment, I'm talking about people who've got mentally ill with their sexual attachment, who end up being rapists and things. They blame that person for looking like that. You see my point? They blame that person for looking like that because they don't think that their mind is creating that fantasy. I mean, a chest with two things poking out, believe me, has no inherent good or bad quality. But all the huge fantasies built up in the world about our sexual energy, we're so totally convinced there's something innate about that. But it's just the mind. So in the mind of, let's say in this case, a man who's got a lot of sexual attachment. So he lives in this fantasy world. So it's a very accusing one, But these women sort of are out there demanding it, expecting it, deserving it. But he doesn't realise his mind is making it up. There's nothing from the side of a body with two things poking up out of the chest and two legs and arms this way and eyes that way. The Buddha's saying this. There's nothing from the side of that object that's inherently good or bad or ugly or delicious or desirable. It's a story made up by the mind, a person who's got attachment to that shape, but then that person goes around yearning to find that shape so they can dump their projection on it. And they blame that person for making, like you blame the chocolate cake for making you stuff it in your mouth. Like, what can I do? I'm just this victim. Look at this delicious chocolate cake. I've got no control. What can I do? That's how attachment talks. It's this big baby, who blames everything else. And Buddha says, hey guys, it's a story made by your mind. There's no inherent delicious female body. There's no inherent delicious cake. It's a story made up by your mind. And then you feel like a victim, but like it's doing it to you. And this is how ridiculous delusions are, Enemy, same thing. Exactly the point. So yes, of course it is true, this person did do this and this and this to you, and they are mean to you. You can see objectively that might be true. So, one of the ways to look at this, to help deal with it, to break down the misconception of mean, ugly enemy, one of the arguments to use to argue with ego's view is the argument of karma. Well, yes, it is true, this person is harming me and did this and did this. But whereas right now we have the innocent victim feeling, like it's not fair. Whereas if you have the view of karma, you use karma to think, okay, well, it's true, he did do this, he did do this, he did do this. But Robina, it's due to past actions. It's your karma manifesting in front of you. Your karma is ripening. So don't dump it on him. So using that argument can really lessen the picture of mean, ugly enemy out there, and it can give you the space to come to the conclusion, which is the point of the equanimity one. Okay, from his side, just because he's harmed me doesn't mean he doesn't want to be happy. Right now, we can't bear to think that he wants to be happy. We don't want to consider it. To think that George wants to be happy, we don't think he deserves it, so anyway, so we don't want to think about it. But we can remove ourselves from it. We can remove ourselves from it and see him more objectively. He's a human being. He wants to be happy. You can't argue with this when you can remove yourself from it. And with a friend, it's the same type of argument. Right now, the aim of equanimity isn't to sort of stop liking your friend. The aim of equanimity is to change the reason you love them. Right now, as Lama Zopa says, the love we have for our friend is unstable because it's based on attachment. So in the same way the Buddha is saying, just because someone is mean to you is no reason to want them to be happy. Well, the same thing. Just because someone is nice to you is no reason to want them to be happy. It's an unstable reason. So what we have to do is, again, remove ourselves from the equation and see this person objectively and realise that from this person's side, they just spontaneously want to be happy. And that the enemy and friend, for example, are identical. They're both the same. In wanting to be happy. That's what we're trying to establish in this equanimity one. Not even love and compassion yet. It's the basis. Objectively, they are the same in wanting to be happy. So it's this removing yourself from it, seeing them separate from you, that allows us to see this. It's just due to karma that this person is mean to me. It's just due to karma this person is kind to me. Yes, indeed, they are kind to me. But that's not the reason to love them. If you think like, especially if you're in love with a person, you're looking at this person, they're smiling at you, all dazzled, think you're just totally divine, and they're smiling at you, and you feel so blissful because you know that you're making them happy, and it's just a marvellous feeling, isn't it? Now he's smiling, you see him again tomorrow, he's smiling, he's happy, but then you realise he's happy because she makes him happy, someone else now, and this is devastating, isn't it? He's still happy. No difference. He was happy yesterday, but the difference was, yesterday you made him happy, and today someone else is making him happy. But look at our difference. Now we hate him. We don't want him to be happy at all. Yesterday we were happy he was happy. Today we're not. Because we're the factor. It's self-centered, in other words. And it's kind of scary to think like this, but we can see it's true. So, to practice This equanimity doesn't mean you have to give up your friend and go live with your enemy. It's not saying that at all. Equanimity is a state of mind that's very clear in seeing that enemy, friend and stranger are equal in wishing to be happy. Separate from you. Stranger. I mean, we usually find the stranger so boring we can't even look at them for more than a second because there's nothing in it for us, is there? We think and think and think about the enemy all the time. We're obsessed with them. We think and think and think about the friend. We're obsessed with them. We never even think about the stranger. You look at you open up the newspaper. You see photos, of some country whose name you can't even say, and their latest suffering of wars and bombs and things. I mean, you just kind of glaze over and go to keep looking for the piece of news that interests you, your people. This is how we are with strangers. Totally indifferent. Doesn't move us at all. You hear that the neighbour 4 doors down whom you've never met died. Oh, really? Oh, where's the tea? Sorry. It doesn't even go in. Nothing is moved. Because, and you check, it's so awful if you think about it, because this person has not touched our life. They haven't touched our life. So we don't even see their humanity. They don't even come into our mind, So you think about it for a second, and you'll realise that that's no basis for thinking that they are in their nature some indifferent person, because indifference is the main feeling we have towards them. Aversion is the feeling we have to the enemy. Attachment is the feeling we have to the friend. Based on attachment, we dazzle, dazzle, love, love, gorgeous, gorgeous. Based on aversion, hate, hate, go away. Based on indifference, couldn't care less. They're really unstable. They're no objective basis. They're stories made up by the delusions. And then you think, this enemy was a stranger once. The friend was a stranger once. So you're on a bus full of strangers and someone stands up and gives you a seat. Oh, what a kind person. Suddenly you notice them. Oh, what a kind person. Excuse me, they were just as kind 30 seconds ago before they were thinking of you. Because they were kind to you, suddenly they come into your front of you, So we can see. And this is all beings in this world. Ants, dogs, humans, all act this way. And we assume it's the objective truth. The point we're trying to see here is there is no objective truth to it. Yes, people are kind to you. Yes, some aren't. And yes, some don't do neither. Buddha's not arguing with that. He's arguing with that, using it as a basis for why you want people to be happy. He says that's what's faulty. So it's a big ask, isn't it? But it's logical. We can see it. So this gives rise to the next little kind of contemplation to do, which is a very curious one for our minds. It sounds very odd. But there's, again, a solid reason for it. That all beings have been our mother. I mean, it's a ridiculous concept. So this is really just a numbers thing, more than anything. This is a numbers thing. Given Buddha's view that all consciousnesses that exist, all beings that exist, their consciousness is beginningless. If you take the view of cause and effect, you sow that seed, you get that fruit. If you go backwards, this is the fruit of that previous seed, and that seed is coming from the previous fruit, which comes from the previous. Then just logically conceptually you can't find a first cause. That's Buddha's point, essentially. You can't find a first cause. Whereas, interestingly, we are desperate for a first something. We say, there must be a first something. There must be, we say. Buddha says, why do you want a first something? Why do you want something to begin? Why do you think there has to be a big absolute beginning, Why? It's fascinating. So the point here is to contemplate this concept, to get your head around the numbers, that if it is true that every living being that exists has a consciousness that is beginningless, and if it is true that all these beings have got delusions, they're in samsara, quote unquote, then it follows logically you've met them all countless times. And so particularly here, we would say they've all been your mum. And the reason to think being your mum is because we're going to use that as a basis for trying to see the next one is to see how the mother is kind. And then the logical conclusion from this is if all beings have been your mother, then all beings have been kind. It's a way to open our heart up to see the kindness of others. It's a simple type of logic to use, Again, for our minds, very curious. So kindness, a very interesting point. Or your mother's kind, I think, well, first of all, let's look at what we even mean by kind. I think that's very interesting. We mean by kind when a person does what I want. You check. When a person does what I want, when, Dad and I go to the restaurant and we order the coffee, the chocolate cake, and the really delicious chocolate cake comes, because we really wanted chocolate cake, we're going to say, thank you so much, you're so kind. But when she brings a carrot cake, excuse me, she's not kind, is she? You see my point? So even our view of what kindness is totally based on ego. It's quite scary, actually. So no wonder we don't think our mothers are kind, because, first of all, how dare she? She made me. I didn't ask to get born, it's my mother's fault. She plonked me in this earth, gives me a lousy life. Why the hell should I think she's kind? The commonest view we have is it's her job anyway. She should be taking care of me. So, when you have all this attachment, this expectation of what she should be doing, and then, inevitably you're going to be dissatisfied with what she does because she doesn't always do what you want, doesn't always do what attachment wants, then we're not going to think she's kind. Well, our view of kindness is mistaken. There's another contemplation here in order to see the kindness, to try and develop a sense of others' kindness to me. And that is that all beings have been kind to us. And this seems initially more outrageous. Let's look at the logic of this. Now you take the simplest thing that you use, like let's say my glasses, If I take these glasses. Now once you start, and this is very true, you can see this. This is not some religious idea made up by somebody. Once you start thinking about the glasses, you're going to see you can't find the beginning of the beings involved in these glasses. So you could say, but for the person in the optician's shop who sold them to me, I wouldn't have glasses. So this person's kind. Not because this person thought especially about me, but really the basis for thinking about kindness here is simply the fact that something happened. The fact that that person was there at the right time and facilitated my getting a pair of glasses so I can now see what I'm reading, Then you start to think of all the other people involved. This came in a little red plastic case, right? The person who made the case, and there's the people who made the glasses, the person who designed the glasses. I mean, you got to keep going. You're not going to find the beginning. The people who made the screws, the people who did did the mold, the little nose piece here, the people who put them together. The factory where these were made, the person who designed the factory, the mother of the person who designed the factory. These are all factors, all beings who have been involved in this elaborate process of getting glasses. That any one of them missing, the whole house of cards collapses, So for this reason alone, you can say, they have been kind to you. Because but for each one of them doing their piece of work, I would not have my glasses. I wouldn't be able to see. And you cannot find anything in your life that doesn't follow this logic. There's nothing. Every piece of food you eat, this building itself, the microphone so you can hear, the clothes you wear, everything is coming from the work of sentient beings. You can't say it's not. It's a fact. Now, why don't we see it spontaneously? Why isn't it in the forefront of our mind? Because we have attachment. We have this primordial neediness for what I want. We see through everything through that filter. So I'm prepared to think the person who designed these is kind because, I like the design. Suits me. The design suits me. So I like it. So I'm thinking, you're a good person. Well done. They designed it. It was an ugly pair of glasses. No way I think the person is kind. A stupid looking designer. Can't they say this is a lousy design, Isn't it? We think this way. So it's all based on attachment. Our assessment of people is based on attachment. Our own narrow needs. So a good example of seeing something and then being reminded of the people who made it in order for your heart to open is my mother. I remember, she had 7 kids. And she kept everything that we ever gave her, that we ever wrote, that we ever made, every little curl she cut off. You understand, like if your mothers, you'd know. She had her house. I mean, when she died, my sister told me there was like weeks of cleaning out all the endless possessions that my mother kept of all her little darling children. So, there's, I'd open my mother's drawer, and there'd be this little drawing, this stupid looking little drawing. Objectively speaking, no inherent value, right? Like these glasses. No inherent value, really. A little drawing. But when I see that, I see this stupid bit of paper with a drawing on it, I'd throw it in the bin. But when my mother saw it, she saw her little Bobsy, me, her little Bobsy's drawing. So her little heart beat when she saw this boring piece of paper. Well, they say that's what bodhisattvas are like. And they've done this type of thinking, and to the point is that everything they see is like their most precious children made it, so it fills them with affection and love, Because they don't just see an object of attachment, they see something that sentient beings made, and their little hearts reach out. When you're in love with somebody, I can't remember the child one, I haven't had a child, but being in love with somebody, this person, you just have to, smell their pillow, and it reminds you of them, isn't it? Once they've gone to work and you turn over and there's their smell. I remember it very well. Am I speaking the truth here?
Yes.
Aren't I? Then it's not just a smelly pillow. Your heart is it? It's your beloved's pillow, isn't it? And it reminds you of him. So your little heart opens. Well, that's all we're talking about here. Now, clearly, it doesn't come naturally to us. Who could care less about the people who designed these glasses and who made them and wrapped them and built them and designed them and so on? We don't even think about these people. But this is the type of exercise. And these beings go off to meditate on this stuff for years, to the point where their hearts are bursting with affection for every sentient being, and just seeing things reminds them of sentient beings. It's you can hear it. You can hear it, Just like my mother, when she saw her kids' things, her heart was reminded. She didn't see a little ugly drawing, she saw her little Bobsy's drawing. Bodhisattvas, when they walk into the supermarket, will be prostrating in tears to get their Vegemite, because all they're seeing is the kindness of sentient beings. That the floors are clean, and the doors are open, the shelf is done, the prices are there, and the nutritional value, and the design of the Vegemite jar. They don't see things in terms of attachment, they see it in terms of sentient beings. This is the work of precious sentient beings. So it's a very profound way to help you open your heart to others. And again, it's not some trip, some concept someone's shoving into your throat. It's totally the truth. It's the truth. But we're blind to this truth because we're mainly seeing things through the filter of our own needs. So I'm prepared to think a person's kind, but mainly when I see these, I see my attachment is satisfied. So there's my glasses, But of course, like already now, it's starting to break, and the chip, there's a crack in it, So starting, aversion is starting to take over. Soon it'll be boring glasses, which I'll chuck away, So we see everything right now through the filter of our own delusions, our own needs. And it blinds us from seeing something obvious, that it's the work of a sentient being. So of course, if you go to the cafe and you order your chocolate cake and they don't give it what you want, you're going to be unhappy with them and you'll be criticising them. How dare you bring me carrot cake? But she worked just as hard to bring you the carrot cake or the chocolate cake. How are you, Mary? I'm your server today. What can I do for you? She writes a little note. She goes over. She hooks it up. Cook gets it, puts it on a plate, gives you a napkin, knife and fork. Same work. Same kindness. But we say she's kind if she brings me what I want, and we say she's not if she doesn't. Again, ego-based, no logical basis. So, we can see, we can hear this. So the same with our mother, So again, this is a very interesting point that I mentioned before, I think, and yesterday. But, Buddha would be saying that the basis we use now, the assumptions we hold that we don't question, which we think of as the truth. He would say, if it's a wrong assumption, if it's not the truth, and that's what we have to find out. Buddha's giving you his view of the truth. Don't just believe it. Check it out. But he would argue that as long as you hold an assumption about something that isn't the truth, then whatever you build upon that is faulty. So he would argue, as we've been talking, that it's not correct to say your mother made you. She didn't invent you. She didn't create you. She gave you a body. You created yourself. Your mind is a continuity. It came from past before. The actions you did created the cause, set you up for your consciousness to go on autopilot from the past life to find its way to your mother's womb. So the Buddha would say that to have this view, this assumption that your parents made you, creates a series of future mistakes. Blame them if they don't do the right thing, expect them to do this, expect them to do that. He says that's faulty. It's like I've got to think about all this stuff, don't just swallow it whole. But if you do have the view of karma, it's very interesting. Don't blame your parents. They're lying there minding their own business, having sex, and you come along. And then even for the fact, just the fact that they provided you with a decent body, their eggs and sperms are all in good order, and you got a decent body. This is enough reason to never stop being grateful to your parents. Even if your mother gave you away at birth, which is usually in worldly terms a reason for people to hate their mother. It's the one reason you have to never stop loving your mother. She didn't abort you. And I'm sure if we did a bit of market research, we're going to find there are probably more humans. Enormous number of humans are aborted, aren't they? Parents choose to abort that fetus. Well, our mother didn't. So she maybe didn't do anything else kind to you. It's even possible. But never stop being grateful to her for this reason alone. She provided you with a body. And also, when you have the view, we have this very deep sense that somehow our mother should be perfect. It's most interesting, actually, that we should think this. But we do. This massive expectation. Where is it, chair? You got a chair? There it is. We have these huge expectations, don't we, that somehow our mother should be perfect. And so from the time we start discovering that she's not perfect, when she falls off the pedestal, we become devastated. And then we become angry with our mother, don't we? That she should be so needy, that she should be so dominating, that she should be so bossy. We really get angry with our parents and really think it's a mistake that she's this way, and so never think she's kind. Well, excuse me, I think that's exactly the reason to think she's kind. Because you know yourself, when you have a lot of attachment or a lot of anger, it's much harder to do what a person needs of you, especially a squealing baby. You've got to sacrifice yourself. It's so much more difficult, So I'm so grateful to my mother for what she did now, thinking about it. She had to work that much harder to be kind to her children, to give them what they needed, because she had her own delusions to deal with. So for the fact that your mother is an ordinary deluded person like you, that's a reason to be grateful to her, because you've got to make extra effort, So really, again, the point here, a series of assumptions we have that we never question, And it's because of these we don't see things very realistically. So thinking like this. Thinking two methods here to try and see the kindness of others. One, how your mother's been kind. And if all beings have been our mother, then they've all been kind. Then seeing how just naturally all beings are kind, because all beings are, things come from beings, work. So the conclusion, the next one is, well, of course, anyone's been kind to you. You want to repay their kindness, don't you? You want to repay their kindness. And what arises from this, these are like simple little ways of thinking, or deceptively simple, actually. We can, ways of thinking that are priming our mind to get to the conclusion, which is love for sentient beings, affection for them. Affection for them. This is what comes from this type of thinking. It builds up. But of course, you've got to think this stuff, not just hear it once and then say goodbye and go back to the default mode of attachment and aversion. This type of meditating, this type of familiarizing your mind, it's like you play the piano once, you're not going to become a pianist. You've got to practice 8 hours a day for years on end until you've familiarized yourself perfectly with the music. Same here. This is the method, in this way, discussing here. Using very clear logic to argue with ego's views, to deconstruct ego's misconceptions, and then think about the opposite way of seeing things, think about other ways of seeing things, and then familiarizing yourself with that until eventually it becomes spontaneous, until eventually it's heartfelt. And then I think this is, the point we discussed this morning. The more we understand the relationship between feelings and thoughts, the more this method makes absolute sense. That the thinking a certain way and building it up, practicing thinking this way, eventually becomes experiential. This is the relationship between feelings and thoughts. And as long as we see them as separate functions, we will never understand this. We won't see the benefit of thinking like this. So like I said, one way you say of being a Buddhist is what you're trying to do is see things differently. See things differently. Change the way we see things, which eventually impacts upon how we feel. Like I said, it's like cognitive therapy. So there's other little techniques that come in here. A whole series of techniques that are coming from a tradition called exchanging self for others. It's a very kind of radical approach to developing extraordinary love and compassion. So one way they talk in the compassion wing is that the main obstacle to really loving others and having compassion for others, the main obstacle is putting self first. And that, as we would simply call it, selfishness, And it's rather painful to be accused of being selfish. But it's a natural consequence of this primordial mistake, as we talked this morning, the primordial mistake of clinging instinctively to this self-existent, solid, in and of itself, inherent me-ness, which we haven't really discussed in depth yet, which we will later, tomorrow maybe. This is like the primordial mistake, the root mistake, this instinctive, mistaken sense of self that causes us to cling primordially to this inherent I, that then gives rise to I need, which is a neurotic attachment, which then gives rise to aversion when attachment is thwarted, and all the other variations, the depression, the anger, the jealousy, and all this stuff, They're all the voices of this mistaken sense of self. So because of this, we naturally separate ourselves from others. Like we were saying before, one of the consequences of this, strong sense of I, wrong sense of I, is this, we've invented this dualistic, we've invented I and other. We've made it up. As I said, what Buddha's saying about the mind, when we've truly purified it, there is no longer, when you fully develop the compassion wing, there is no longer a separate sense of self. Quite literally, you'd say that. You've completely depolluted the mind. So your consciousness now, which is pervading the universe, which is non-physical, in its nature, no longer a sense of a neurotic I, no longer attachment, no longer aversion. Then there's this natural sense of connectedness with others. It's just natural. It's like I'm saying, there's no sense of self and other. On a conventional sense, you're not stupid. You don't think you're sitting over there. You know there's Mary and you know there's you. But but that's just a conventional thing. You know that. It's a relative reality. But there's a sense of complete connection with others. No longer a sense of separateness. Which is a very interesting concept. And again, as I've been saying, we've got no reference point really for this in our daily life, in our psychology and so on. It sounds kind of cranky, doesn't it? It sounds weird. A bit cosmic, So what we can say, on the wisdom wing, from the wisdom wing point of view, the main obstacle is this ego grasping, this instinctive primordial sense of self. Now, on the compassion wing, the main obstacle, you could say, is this one of what they call self-cherishing, putting self first, selfishness. This is the main obstacle. So in this whole approach here of exchanging self for others, what we're trying to do is just do that. Literally put others first. So this is interesting, this whole approach, because when we hear this now, it's kind of a bit threatening, because it sounds like unhealthy. But what about me, we'll say, It sounds like strange. So we really have to be, as Prabhupada Rinpoche says, we need to be suitable vessels to really hear this appropriately. This type of teaching is one they call exchanging self for others, which comes from, which was taught by Atisha in the 11th century in Tibet. And he went to Indonesia to one of his gurus, Salingpa, to get these teachings. Prabhupada says, we need to be a suitable vessel to hear this approach appropriately. And what he means by that is, we have to have done some work on the wisdom wing. Because a person who has a strong, unhappy sense of self, has strong attachment, strong neediness, strong anger, strong jealousy, strong low self-esteem, you wouldn't advise them to go and exchange themselves for others. It wouldn't be a thing that they'd even be capable of. Put others first. Inappropriate. So we need to be suitable. We need to really hear this in an appropriate way. I mean, for example, in one of these little exchanging self for other little texts, like a poetic little text called the 8 Verses. One of the verses says, when you're with others, see yourself as the lowest of all. See others as supreme. Now we would say, excuse me, Buddha, I already see myself as the lowest of all. What are you telling me here? So we've really got to hear it correctly. Because let's face it, if we walked into a room and we're full of low self-esteem and self-loathing and depression or jealousy or whatever, there's no way we can see ourselves in a healthy way. We wouldn't even know what it means to see others as supreme. Because when you've got this wrong sense of self, you can actually say that low self-esteem is an expression of ego, a wrong way of seeing yourself. So it's an overemphasis of I. So actually the way it is now, we do see ourselves as the lowest of all. But what's interesting, when we see others are better than we are, they're more beautiful, they're more happy, they're more this, we're resentful of it. It doesn't make us happy at all, does it? We use that to harm ourselves. Well, look at all these other people, so more happy than me, more beautiful, more intelligent, more rich, and you get more miserable, more self-hating. Well, that's completely unstable. That's completely suffering, That's not what's being said here. So really what's being said here is, in this attempt to practice putting others first, we have to practice looking at others and finding something good about them. I think, again, this is a bit scary. Even if you're there sitting there talking to your friend and you're smiling and saying loving words, the critical part of your mind, the negative part, the I-centered part, is finding fault even. God, they're talking a bit loud. Oh, I don't like that dress. Oh, she's a bit fat now. Oh, I don't think, she's talking a bit much. I mean, even our friend, we hear our little words, we hear our negative little story going on in the back of our mind. We are doing this all the time, because the way ego works is it's naturally separate from others. So we're always comparing ourselves with others. So if it's low self-esteem, we think they're more beautiful and we're resentful. If it's arrogance, we think they're less beautiful and we feel so proud and special. So there's always this dualistic comparison. So we're training ourselves here to feel connected to others. So one marvellous method is to practice seeing good things. Consciously, each person you think of. Don't make a big song and dance out of it, But in your mind, look at each person and find something really good about them. Eventually, of course, these bodhisattvas, that's what they do spontaneously. I mean, for example, people say when they're with the Dalai Lama, I remember in '96 when the FPMT invited him there to Australia. He was there for like 2 months, I think. And we did a special article in Mandala magazine. And I interviewed lots of people, like the police who were his guards and the press, all kinds of people across the board. And everybody had the same type of response. I remember seeing it even again 15 years before that in Europe, in 1982, when the FPMT invited His Holiness to Germany and France. And Lama Yeshe actually at the time asked 10 of us to be security guards. I was one of them. And we travelled around with him in Italy and France, and Italy and Spain. And I remember the mayor of Rome. This is in 1982, before he was even that very well known, The mayor of Rome was in tears, saying, this is the greatest day of my life. I remember the people in Barcelona, all these middle-aged, middle-class Catholics, kind of desperate to get into this place and listen to this person's words. These Catholic monks in this amazing Carthusian monastery up in the mountains in Spain, where they spent all their life meditating and praying. Amazing, these guys. They were just in bliss with the Dalai Lama, The police in Australia, the press, everybody who talks, who has had time with him, spontaneously. They all say it was like being just somehow you felt so good. And he says, whenever I'm with anybody, they're my best friend. And that's how people feel, you know. So you can deduce from this, I suppose, that he must truly see the best in everybody. And so that's what's interesting, is if we think, walking around thinking I'm the lowest of all, it means you think like a creep, I'm a worm, they're so much better than me, I'm a worm. It's not saying that. I mean, the Dalai Lama very evidently doesn't think this way. He's a very powerful, charismatic person, you know. But he delights in every person he meets, because he's no longer, you can deduce this I suppose, that he's no longer got this neurotic sense of a separate self, no sense of threat, no vested interest in seeing his own good qualities. He already is who he is. So then is only, what all that's left is only to be happy with others and love others and delight in others, you know. This is what the Buddha is saying we're capable of. So we have to practice this. We have to practice seeing others as supreme, truly finding delight in their qualities, truly being happy to see something good about them. This brings us to okay, just let me finish. It's interesting, if we think of characteristics like, let's say we were talking before how we confuse things like love and attachment. You know, Buddha's saying attachment, the word he's using is referring to an unhappy, neurotic neediness that causes us to manipulate, to expect, to control. It's fearful, it's grasping, that one, which is really painful, right? Then we have what we call love, which is may you be happy, a delight, an affection, an openness, a connectedness with another. Now right now, as I was saying before, we mix these together as if they're the same thing, you know. We also mix others. You could say, using ordinary terms we use, you could say self-confidence. It's a really appropriate quality. We need self-confidence. So you could say a person who's got rid of attachment, anger, pride, jealousy is a person who's extremely self-confident. They'd be very comfortable, as we'd say, comfortable in their own skin, you know. Then they have another quality that we can say is a delusion, which we could call arrogance or pride, let's say, arrogance. So if you have two people, if you can imagine two people, let's say in a crowd of people, one has arrogance and one has self-confidence. So you'd say the one who's got the arrogance, they're totally caught up in their sense of self. They're threatened by anybody who'd be better than they are. Always checking, comparing. Arrogant. But what's interesting, when they do meet a person who's better than they are in whatever it is, they're going to suddenly be completely deflated. And what are they going to have now? Oh, I'm such a bad person. It's low self-esteem. So this is kind of scary for us to hear this in the West, because we really are familiar with low self-esteem. It's the flip side of pride. It's sort of like looking in the mirror. Oh, I'm so beautiful. Or looking in the mirror. Oh, I'm so ugly. The reference point is the same. The mistake is the same. This neurotic sense of self. Whereas a person, you could say, who has self-confidence is unself-consciously in their own skin, content with what they are, therefore delighted to see other people who are better, happy to praise someone else who's even better and happily learn from them, because they don't have any, it's not I-based. So you could say that a person who's self-confident has humility. A person who has arrogance has low self-esteem. You see what I'm saying? Again, the constant point to remember in the way Buddhist psychology is talking is that the characteristic of all the unhappy states of mind is the neurotic I, the grasping, the fearful sense of self. The characteristic of the positive states of mind is necessarily not that. It's necessarily a connection with others. And that's the distinction all the time. So there's, this business of exchanging self for others. Then we'll stop for dinner. Dinner time, right? 6 o'clock dinner? Mm-hmm. I forget, in France they have dinner like Spain and France. They have really strange hours. You have lunch at 3 and dinner at 10, and you start your I'm a bit exaggerating actually. They usually start their teachings at 9 in the evening, and they have dinner at very different hours. And they seem to get up early again in the morning. So anyway, we have dinner. So let's think about dinner differently, okay? Don't think the same. Think of dinner differently. Not as an object of attachment, or for that matter, aversion. No, I don't like carrots. Not like that. Think of it as think of it as interdependent, and think of it now from the point of view of the kindness of sentient beings. Those people kindly in the kitchen who chopped it up and put it on the stove, and cooked it. People who served it. People who cleaned the place. The people who did the menu and went shopping. The people who, all the people in, just a few people. Forget about the sentient beings. You might be eating flesh of animals, but countless beings have died in the growing and the picking and of these vegetables. Countless little sentient beings have died. So we think of them, all the factors involved in bringing this food has no inherent nature. So we now think it's an ocean of nectar, delicious food, not just a little tiny bowl. And we imagine now, Lama Zopa says this is the most profound thing, to want to offer it to others. So imagine, use our creative imagination, this ocean of nectar. We now imagine offering it to all the holy beings, all the holy beings, and all the suffering sentient beings, and all the realms of existence. Imagining all the animals, all the creatures, all the humans, the whole of the world full of all these sentient beings, and all these holy beings. And we imagine all of them experiencing the delight of receiving it, happily offering it to them before you put it into your own mouth. Lama Sangye Lama Chödejin Lama Gedunte Kungi Jepo Lama Te Lama Namla Chöpabu. And then as Rinpoche said one time, once you bless the food and offered it, the bigger your stomach, the better.